He looked into the camera and said 6 words that stunned the world. "I've decided to be baptized." Why would the world's most rational man take a step of faith, live unscripted and unplanned? And what he said after the water is what no one saw coming. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The studio lights glowed warmly as Elon Musk stepped onto the familiar set, dressed in a charcoal blazer and calm as ever. The audience clapped politely as he shook hands with the host, who welcomed him with a wide grin and a few light jokes about space tourism and AI assistants that never listen. Elon chuckled, his posture relaxed, his voice smooth. It was the kind of segment people had come to expect from him. Updates on electric vehicles, progress on Mars colonization, a few clever quips about brain-computer interfaces. As the cameras zoomed in and the broadcast rolled out live to millions across the globe, the host leaned forward and asked with a smile, "So, Elon, what's next on your world-changing list?" There was a pause, just a beat. But in that moment, everything changed. Elon's face shifted, his tone softened. He turned from the host and looked directly into the camera. The laughter in the room quieted. The control room went still. "I've decided," he said, "to be baptized." The host blinked, his expression faltering. The audience didn't cheer, didn't laugh. No one knew what to do. Elon sat forward slightly, voice low but steady. "I've thought about this for a long time. And it's time." The silence in the studio stretched until Elon finally spoke again. "I've spent my life building things to reach the stars," he said, voice quiet but clear. "But I've never really looked inward. Not deeply." The host sat frozen, his notes forgotten on the table. Cameras captured every second, broadcasting the unexpected confession to homes around the world. Within minutes, clips began circulating on social media. Twitter trended globally. Elon Musk baptism. News anchors scrambled for context. Commentators split across networks, some skeptical, others stunned into admiration. Viewership surged. People weren't tuning in for rockets anymore. They wanted to understand the man behind them. Elon continued, his eyes still locked on the camera. "This isn't about turning my back on science or reason. It's about recognizing that there's more to this world than equations can solve. This," he paused, taking a breath, "this is something I can't invent or control. It's something I need to accept." A producer behind the glass whispered, "He's serious." Supporters began sharing personal testimonies. Critics accused him of seeking attention, but none could deny the weight of the moment. Elon folded his hands in his lap, calm. "This isn't a moment of science," he said. "It's a moment of surrender." A few minutes into the interview, after the initial shock had settled, the host gently asked Elon what had led him to such a personal, unexpected decision. Elon hesitated, then leaned forward slightly, voice lower now, more introspective. "A few months ago," he began, "I lost someone close to me. He wasn't just a friend. He was a mentor. Someone I'd known since my early days, long before the world was watching." The audience grew quiet again. Elon rarely spoke of personal relationships. "He was a man of deep faith," Elon continued, "and though we didn't always agree, our conversations stuck with me. Late nights, long talks about meaning, purpose, and the soul. He'd ask me questions I couldn't answer, not with algorithms, not with data." After the funeral, Elon said, he found himself sitting alone one night, staring at the stars from his balcony. "I wasn't searching for anything, not at first. I was just trying to quiet the noise. But something shifted. I opened a book he'd once given me, a small Bible, tucked on a shelf, and I read. not out of belief, but curiosity. He started with the Psalms. There was one line, he said, that stayed with me. "Be still and know that I am God." He paused again. "I've built companies that move fast. I've launched rockets. I've spent decades chasing the future. But that line, it hit me like gravity. Be still. That's the one thing I'd never done." The studio felt like it was holding its breath. Elon's tone softened even more. It didn't feel like a command. It felt like an invitation to listen, to open up, to stop needing to understand everything before I could believe anything. Then, quietly, he added, "That night, I stopped building and started listening." The backlash came faster than the applause. Within hours of Elon's on-air baptism announcement, headlines began to swirl like a storm. Musk's most shocking move yet. Spiritual pivot or PR ploy? News anchors debated it live. Was it real? Was it timed? Was this the same Elon Musk who once claimed to trust probability more than prayer? Social media caught fire. Supporters called it brave. Detractors called it branding. A journalist on a popular network smirked. "We've seen Elon launch rockets, tweet memes, and name his kid after a robot. But this? Baptism? That's new." Inside Tesla's Palo Alto office, the atmosphere was tense. Elon's communications team huddled in a glass-walled room as the clip of his announcement played on loop behind them. His lead publicist tapped a pen nervously. "We need a response, something neutral. Maybe stress that this is a personal journey, not a corporate shift." A marketing executive chimed in. "Investors are getting antsy. Some think this could alienate consumers. We need damage control." Elon entered quietly, hands in his pockets. He listened without interrupting. Then, when the room finally fell silent, he simply said, "No spin, no cleanup." His team exchanged worried glances. "You're sure?" the publicist asked. Elon nodded. This wasn't a marketing stunt. This wasn't strategy. It was surrender. Let it stand. He walked out, leaving behind a table full of people who didn't know whether to defend him or follow his lead. That night, headlines clashed on every major network. Musk goes spiritual, genius or gimmick. Some pundits accused him of chasing relevance. Others questioned his mental health. A famous podcaster mocked the moment. Next week he'll start preaching on but the critics didn't rattle him. Back home, Elon read through his messages. One from a close friend stood out. "This isn't you. You're a man of logic, not faith." Elon replied, "Maybe logic brought me far, but it couldn't take me all the way." The next morning, his assistant handed him a report. Investor concerns, media firestorms, trending hashtags. Elon skimmed it, then placed it face down on the table. A young engineer in the hallway asked him quietly, "Sir, are we supposed to explain what happened?" Elon paused, then said, "I didn't ask for anyone to understand. I just asked myself what was honest." Meanwhile, the internet churned. Debates lit up every corner of YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Reddit. Clips from the interview were dissected frame by frame. Analysts broke down his words. Linguists studied his tone. Past interviews were unearthed for contradictions. But one comment stopped the scroll for millions. A renowned astrophysicist tweeted, "We have theories for everything. Black holes, string theory, multiverses. But we still can't define what stirs the human soul." Musk didn't glitch. He just cracked open the last taboo. That tweet went viral in under 5 minutes. By sunrise, it had crossed 5 million views. Back at his LA office, a few board members pushed back. "You should have warned us," one of them said. "This affects the brand." Elon looked out the window. Maybe the brand needs to grow too. Later that evening, alone in his home study, he stared at a paused frame of himself. Standing in the river, soaked, Still. Not the innovator, not the billionaire. Just a man looking for something more. A well-known scientist tweets, "He just cracked open the last taboo." The studio was smaller this time, more intimate. No sweeping digital backdrops, no audience buzz. Just 2 chairs, warm lights, and a host known more for asking hard questions than promoting headlines. Elon sat still, his posture composed but less rigid than usual. His eyes had a softness as though some invisible weight had settled in just behind them. "You've always been known for logic, data, and systems," the host began carefully. "A man who sends rockets into orbit and dreams of colonizing Mars. Why suddenly speak of baptism and faith?" Elon leaned forward slightly, his fingers interlaced. "Because even rockets have limits," he said simply. "Even data can't measure what we feel when we lose someone, or when we hold a newborn for the first time, or when we sit alone under the stars and ask why we're here." The host nodded slowly but pressed further. "But faith, doesn't that contradict your scientific identity? Isn't belief in the unseen inherently irrational?" Elon didn't flinch. "That's a fair question, and one I asked myself for years." He took a breath, eyes narrowing not in frustration, but in reflection. "I used to think faith was the opposite of reason, that you had to switch off your brain to believe. But that's not what I've discovered. I've come to believe that faith isn't irrational, it's human." The host raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Elon sat back. "Because reason alone doesn't answer everything. Data brought me to this edge, but love brought me over it." The room fell into a moment of silence. "When I lost a close friend," Elon continued, "I searched for logic, for control, but grief isn't linear. There's no algorithm for what to do when your heart breaks. I found myself sitting up at night reading the Bible, not as a scientist, but as a man who needed something more than numbers." The host seemed genuinely moved. "And did you find it?" Elon gave a faint nod. "There was one night I won't forget. I was sitting alone, just tired. I opened the book and landed on a line from Psalms, 'Be still and know that I am God.' It stopped me, because I realized I've never been still. My whole life has been about motion, building, solving, accelerating. But in that stillness I felt something I couldn't explain." The host leaned in, almost whispering now. "What did you feel?" "Peace," Elon said. "And presence. Not a booming voice from the sky. Just a quiet sense that I wasn't alone, that the search itself mattered." The host's voice softened. "You once said you'd follow evidence wherever it led. Did you ever expect it to lead here?" "No," Elon admitted. "But isn't that the point of real discovery? To go beyond what we think we know. The universe has always surprised us. Quantum mechanics, dark matter, consciousness. Why would the soul be any different?" The host smiled, visibly affected. "So, do you still believe in science?" "Absolutely," Elon replied. "But now, I also believe in soul." The words hung in the air, reverent and raw. Outside the studio, the internet was ablaze. Some mocked, others praised. But millions were watching, not because Elon had solved something, but because, for once, he had surrendered to what couldn't be solved. "I still believe in science. I just now believe in soul, too." The morning of Elon Musk's baptism did not begin with grand headlines or countdown clocks. It began with stillness. A narrow bend in a quiet river, soft light from a rising sun breaking through trees, and a small crew. Silent, respectful, capturing only what mattered. Elon arrived before most. No entourage, no press, just him. He wore a plain white robe, not symbolic of spectacle, but of simplicity. For a man whose name had been tied to rockets, algorithms, empires, today wasn't about in. The pastor met him with a nod. He was older, calm, his voice worn in the best way. They said very little. There was no script, no rehearsal, just breath, and the sound of water lapping against smooth stones. As Elon stepped down toward the river's edge, his movements were careful, unhurried. The robe shifted with each step. His bare feet touched the cool surface, and the sensation made him pause. Not from cold, but from clarity. He was fully present, for once not calculating the next move. Just there. A few feet away, the camera rolled, not for the world, but for the moment. The pastor placed a steady hand on Elon's shoulder. "This isn't about answers," he said. "It's about surrender. Saying yes without knowing everything." Elon didn't respond with words. He simply nodded, eyes fixed on the water. They stepped forward together. The river rose up slowly, surrounding him inch by inch until it reached his waist. The breeze moved through the trees like a whispered prayer. The crew didn't move. No one spoke. Even nature seemed to wait. Then the pastor asked quietly, "Are you ready?" Elon took a deep breath. "I am." The pastor gently leaned him back. The water received him in full. For one suspended moment, the man who had tried to reach the stars disappeared beneath the surface of the employee. And then he rose. Dripping, blinking, breathing. The same man, but somehow not. His eyes scanned the horizon, then the trees, then the camera. His chest lifted with a slow inhale. When he exhaled, something invisible left him. He looked lighter. The transformation wasn't theatrical. It was subtle. His jaw had unclenched. His brow, so often furrowed, was smooth. The man who emerged was not an icon, not an innovator, just a soul who had been touched by something deeper than intellect. He took a few slow steps toward the camera. His robe clung wetly to his legs. His hands were relaxed at his sides. He didn't rush. The silence around him didn't press in. It held him. When he stopped, just a foot from the lens, he didn't look at the crew or the pastor. He looked directly into the camera, as if through it. And in a voice quiet enough to make the whole world lean in, he said, "This is my new beginning." The camera held on his face. The breeze carried the sound of the river. Behind him, the pastor stood quietly. Ahead of him, a new chapter had already begun. Elon Musk stepped forward, water still glistening on his robe, his hair damp from the baptism that had just taken place in front of millions of live viewers. But the real gravity of the moment wasn't in the water. It was in what he was about to say. The crowd around the quiet riverside stood still. The camera panned in slowly, and Elon, for once, didn't rush. He waited, breathed, looked down briefly, then raised his eyes. "This isn't the end," he began, voice steady but quieter than usual. "This is a new framework for everything." It was a simple sentence, but the weight of it settled like a hush across the crowd and viewers tuning in from every corner of the world. Elon adjusted the towel resting on his shoulder, then placed it down. He leaned slightly forward, as though what he was about to say came from a deeper place than logic. "I've lived my life building things. Systems, companies, technology. I've looked outward more than inward. Mars was always the goal. Expansion, innovation. But I forgot to ask the deeper question. Why?" He let the word hang in the air. "I realized," he continued, "that we can build machines to reach the stars, but we haven't figured out how to care for one another here on Earth." Someone in the crowd gasped quietly. Others simply stared, frozen in attention. "We can send rockets to Mars," he said slowly. "But can we love one another?" The words didn't come with flash or fire. They came like wind moving through a field, gentle, but impossible to ignore. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I used to think that values were abstract, Elon admitted. That ethics were philosophical debates, best left to academics or politicians. But without values, velocity becomes chaos. Without purpose, progress loses meaning. He looked directly into the lens. We need values to guide velocity. It was quiet again, not for lack of noise, but for presence, for gravity, the kind of silence that follows truth, not confusion. I'm still an engineer, he said, still a scientist, still someone who believes in testing, questioning, improving. But I've learned that science has limits. Data can describe the shape of a tear, but it can't tell you why it falls. He exhaled deeply, almost as if releasing years of weight. I've learned that love, loss, hope, and faith, they can't be measured. But they move us. They build us. They even save us. Viewers around the world leaned in closer to their screens. Phones rang. Social media feeds lit up. But for those listening, it wasn't about the trend. It was about truth. Faith isn't the rejection of reason, he said. It's the realization that some of the most important parts of life aren't reducible to logic. He spoke now not just as a public figure, but as a man changed. I've always searched the stars. Now, I'm also searching the soul. A tremor moved through the crowd. The river behind him sparkled in the sun, catching light on its surface, like fragments of something sacred. I still believe in science, he said. I just now believe in soul, too. And with that, Elon stepped back from the microphone. Not with a mic drop, not with a tweet, just a simple look into the camera. Humble, raw, and unmistakably human. The screen began to fade, but just before it did, his final words returned in voiceover. We don't just need AI to be intelligent. We need humanity to be wise. In the days following Elon Musk's public baptism, something unusual happened. He went quiet. No press releases, no interviews, no tweets. The world, still echoing with his words, "We need values to guide velocity," was left in a kind of stillness that felt both frustrating and sacred. For a man who usually moved at the speed of invention, the silence was deafening. But behind the silence, something deeper was stirring. Letters began to arrive, thousands of them. People from every continent shared how the moment had touched them. A woman in South Africa wrote that after years of bitterness, she had finally returned to church with her daughter. A teenager in Brazil said that Elon's words made him pick up a Bible for the first time in his life. In Kansas, an elderly veteran started a prayer circle in his community, simply calling it the Musk Group. Churches across the world reported a rise in attendance, not from religious fervor, but from something quieter. Curiosity, reflection, a longing for meaning. The clip of Elon rising from the river became one of the most shared videos in internet history. Still, Elon said nothing. Then, quietly, one photo surfaced. Elon, alone at a hillside cemetery, standing by a simple gravestone. No camera crew, no entourage, just him. In his hand was a folded note. He placed it gently on the grave of his old mentor, the man whose conversations about life, faith, and eternity had once seemed so abstract. The note simply read, "I listened, you were right." That evening, in a rare, softly lit interview, Elon finally spoke again. "It's no longer just about building the future," he said. "It's about becoming." And with those words, everything felt different. Not just because a titan of industry had changed, but because he had reminded the world that even the most brilliant minds need stillness. Even the strongest builders need something deeper than blueprints. Awe, surrender, becoming. And for the millions watching, that was more than enough. The house was quiet that night. The chaos had faded. No more headlines, no more live feeds, just the soft hum of night outside the windows. Elon walked slowly into his son's room, where X was curled up beneath a blanket patterned with stars and rockets. Elon sat on the edge of the bed. X blinked up at him sleepily, then reached for his hand. "Are you different now, Dad?" he asked softly. Elon paused, brushing a strand of hair away from X's forehead. "I'm becoming," he said. "Becoming more of who I'm meant to be." X nodded like he understood, like he didn't need the details, like something in his heart had already known the answer. Elon kissed his forehead and tucked the blanket up under his chin. As he turned off the lamp and walked toward the door, he looked back one last time. X was already drifting off, breathing slow and steady, his small hand resting over his heart. Sometimes the most powerful leap isn't into space, it's into stillness, into something deeper than exploration, into truth, into soul, into surrender. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real future begins. If this story moved you, subscribe now for more inspiring stories that remind us to pause, reflect, and believe again.